Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to my channel Science to Technology. In today's show, Computer Wednesday, we're going to talk about portable media. Basically, we'll go from USB to everything else. So what's the deal? Well, basically, if you are old enough, as in 30s, you must have seen a resurgence of these puppies, USB to memory sticks. Now they started very small, like 128 megabytes or like 32 megabytes. They started small and then started to grow in size, meaning these puppy I bought like 10-15 years ago. This was 32 gigabytes, so it was a big deal when it was launched. But here's the problem: while 32 gigabyte is a good capacity, heck, it's even today it's almost like a full rip of a normal Blu-ray, so it's a big capacity. The throughput of this USB 2.0 is not fast enough, meaning realistically you're only gonna get a 20 megabytes per second, maybe 40. Read and write both ways, because this is the limiting factor. It does not go faster than that. So even if the chips inside can actually read and write faster, the interface, USB interface, was the weak link. And this is the same time when people started to use this, basically your main hard drive, 3.5-inch hard drive, as a basically external data storage. But because of these sizes and the power draw, they generally used to come with adapters, meaning you had to have mains adapter. We did not have power delivery yet. So the idea was that you're gonna have this, is you're gonna have a SATA to USB converter, and then you're gonna feed it 12-volt power. Now it did work. It give you a lot of capacity. It's not portable. So people were like, okay, what if we take micro drives, basically these sort of puppy 2.5-inch drives. You can see in contrast to each other, this is generally found in laptops. So what if we use this is also power efficient enough where it can actually run on USB directly. You do not need power adapters. So this became very big deal. However, at the same time, computer industry realizing that the biggest problem is the throughput, not the basically media, it's the pipe. Basically, both sides. Computer can read faster, and your media can read and write faster. It's just that a pipe in between was the weak link. So in 2008, USB 3.1, USB 3.0 was announced. So this puppy now upgraded the pipe to 5 Gbps or 500 megabytes per second. Yes, it does not translate one to one, but generally it's a good idea to divide by 10. Then you will get the actual Mbps throughput, error correction, all that jazz. So you can go from this puppy to this sort of puppy. Now this time we got scammed a hard and a lot, meaning many people bought this sort of pen drive and they specified USB 3.0, and some actually, I'm not even joking, some this is long ago, they actually had markings. They were showing like interface speed of 5 Gbps. It's like, I'm not gonna get to that 600 megabytes per second or even 500, because the memory chips used were basically the same thing that used here. So they upgraded the USB. So and they did one thing that was very bad. Like that's why people have such a bad reputation of 3.0 pen drives. They put flash chips that had a bit of cache. So for example, this is 128 gigabyte. If I'm transferring 1 to 2 gigabytes of file, it will be super quick. Why? Because it has cache memory. It goes into cache slowly writes it to the main drive. So it's super fast. But the moment I transfer big files, let's say 4 gigabytes or 90 gigabytes, even though it is 128 gigabyte, that time's write speed will go down drastically. You will because at that point you have to write directly into the memory, and the speed would be around 20 mbps, same as these puppy. So if the justification was that most people don't transfer big files, I'm like, dude, if that were true, nobody will buy big pen drives. We are buying big pen drives, we are using it. And there was one positive side of it, was that read speed of flash chips are faster than the write speed. Write speed in the early days was horrendous. I'd gone through all this cycle of going from this to actual SSD. So I know, like back in the days, read speed was like super fast, but write speed was super slow. So even though writing on this puppy could be 20 mbps, but you can read at 60 to 80. Or sometimes some good chips were able to sustain 150 mbps. So almost they were reaching the right basically read speed of these things. So they were actually okay-ish. But again, if you're not going to write the data, what's the point? And for backup, you want to write data very quickly. For transfer file, you want to write data very quickly. So could you use this today? Well, yeah, you can basically burn ISO into these puppies and use it for installation of OS, because again, write speed is fast. You will have a good time. So, but again, nothing more than that. Like this was like a very bad letdown. So people started to jump into these puppies, basically upgraded version of this. You have to understand, these came in generally two sizes, a slim variant and a fat variant. Fat variants allowed large capacity, like this puppy. As of now, I think this is the largest you can commonly buy. This is 5 terabytes. It shows around 4.5 terabytes in that's another issue of like gigabytes to gigabytes. Your Microsoft counts 1024 is one. That's the one next unit. These things manufacturers count 1000 to 1. Like basically they are going normal, like grams to kilogram, they are going from the same mega to giga and all that. But computer, your Microsoft computer specifically, it's counting in different units. So that's why there is that. So you can directly find online calculators to convert GB to G small I B, GB bits. So if you do that, then you will find the actual capacity. It's not that they are stealing. And again, in big drives, it's a very big difference. So if you buy, for example, 18 terabytes of these puppy, yeah, you only gonna get 16. And it's not cheating or anything, it's just counting with different units. So that's why, like, whenever you find this sort of thing, it will openly say 2000 gigabytes flat out. It will say that this one does not have that. This one does not have that. Generally they have that, you can read it. They will be very clear about it, because they are not cheating. It's just that Microsoft is reading differently and other people are like, no, we want to read differently. So this was very good, very successful, and majority of you have used this. However, even though it had new upgraded interface that can give you 5 gigabits per second or 500 megabytes, this was not fast enough. Meaning, if you are lucky, this will give you 50 Mbps to 150. If you have something like this, you can go from 150 to 250 maximum. You're not gonna get faster read and write than these puppies. Thankfully, these puppies had equivalent read and write. So the as fast as you can read, as fast as you can write, they are generally the same. Then we come into, like, 2010 to 2015 era. There is a new kid in town. This is the biggest jump in computer from 1990s. We basically went from having this as your primary compute, basically your operating system drive, to installing these SSDs. Now, SSDs were basically same chips with this, but with the improvement, advancement that happened on the chips are much faster. Improvement and advancement in the microcontrollers that allowed these NAND flash to be read and write, they also improved. So this finally reached a point where that can actually saturate, let me be very clear, saturate SATA 3.0. We started with SATA 1. SATA 1 was 150 megabytes per second, SATA 2 300 megabytes per second, SATA 3 600. Basically, it was doubling every time, but they reached a point where this thing can actually exceed it. Meaning, this was never, like, even right now you can buy 18 terabyte and all that. The read and write speed is still super slow. Like, that's the biggest weak link right now. Read and write is just not fast enough on mechanical drive. So we started to use these puppy for operating system, and nowadays this is the primary means of communication. So this actually started to exceed what your SATA can do. So it again, if you buy the cheapest one, and in the early days, even though read speed was very good, write speed was very horrible. But nowadays, if you buy even this is a cheap one, like Crucial BX500, it's just a very cheap one, but still is good enough where read and write speed both, let me verify, both are at 500 megabytes per second. So now you can, if you have any of these laying around, you can buy enclosures like this, very cheaply enclosure, and you can convert that SATA into USB. And the 5 gigabits per second capacity of USB is more than enough to match it. So you can have read and write on this puppy very effectively. You can do even video editing. Be mindful, we actually do video editing on these things many times. So this is faster than that, although capacity is smaller. So because of the development in flash reached a point where SATA was limited, USB was limited, a new interface was created. They were like, okay, what if we directly communicated with the computer or PCI, meaning SATA was a different interface. It had to talk through computer. So somebody is like, what is the most closest interface? That's RAM. Second closest, PCI. PCI Express is the second fastest. So compared to RAM. So PCI Express was now used for this puppy. This is we call NVMe. Now NVMe is the protocol, and the structure that you see is what we call M.2. So when you're talking about M.2, you're talking about this form factor. When you're talking about NVMe, you're talking about the protocol that is used into this. So M.2 is a road, and NVMe is the language, rules of the road, so to say. So this became fast enough. Now, a lot of lessons have been learned from going from SATA to all that. So we realized same thing is like, if you go PCI, you do not have to worry about it. This came into the market when PCI 3.0 became a thing. Now, thankfully, when PCI 3 became a thing, they realized that once you have your storage on PCI, you no longer need to upgrade it. PCI itself will upgrade it, and both sides can be upgraded. Meaning, if you have a lot of money and you bought PCI 4.0 drive on PCI 3.0 motherboard, no problem, it will still work. You have PCI 4.0 motherboard and you have 3.0 drive, it will still work, meaning if you can port your old system into it, it will work. Now, what about the speed? These puppies are fast. Even on PCI 3.0, which is outdated at this point in time, they can easily read and write sustainably up to 2 gigabytes per second, and some even more faster than that. And then by the time PCI 4.0, right now PCI 5.0 is starting into the market, they can touch 8 gigabytes per second read and write, very fast. Like I have a quite high end one, my Samsung. I'll remember to put the speed test of it. It's fast. So this became the new standard, and because of the mass production and because it does not require as much metal as this actually started to become cheap. Now, is it as cheap as like a mechanical drive for large capacity? No. But if you buy 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte, generally they are cheaper than mechanical drive. But the moment you exceed 2 terabytes, it starts to become price starts to come. Now be mindful, it's different in different countries. I've seen American prices, they are very cheap. In India, it's not that much. Like for 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte is there for that. And for some reason, mechanical drive prices are going up exponentially. Like this was a largest I could buy. Right now, even I could not afford this. This is double the price right now. So I have no idea why the prices of mechanical drive is going that much. So sooner or later, we all have to deprecate these puppies because again, moving parts, magnets, it consumes too much mineral in order to make it. Remove the design part of it. Just the mineral content on these puppies are high. So sooner or later, everything has to turn to this. Otherwise, we simply won't be able to make more of them. So you can buy this. Now, can you convert this into a external USB? Yes, that's the whole point of SSD. So you just have to buy Enclosure that has a converter for NVMe to USB. Now, this works quite well, although there is a hassle. Somebody started to smoke something very bad or very good, depending on your definition, in USB association. So in USB association, they started to rename things that were already launched. Now, this is a very critical part and you will get confused because of it, but you have to understand it's almost by design. So you have to be very vigilant. So let me go back to 2008. USB 3.0 was announced. It's the biggest jump. Even hard drives were like, whoa, now you can have like 250 megabytes per second external. People were like, whoa. SSDs were becoming a thing. It was around the horizon, so we knew it could become a thing. Everybody's happy, everybody's having fun, and then they started smoking. So USB 3.0 was 5 gigabits per second or 500 megabytes per second. So it was quite fast, and then they renamed it USB 3.1 Gen 1. Yes, this is first rename. Products are already in the market. My old motherboard box has the USB 3.0, but again, they renamed a product that was already released. They renamed it to USB 3.1 Gen 1. Now, okay, that happens once in a while. Okay, they renamed it again. Not even joking. Now they renamed the same interface, same protocol, same bandwidth to USB 3.2 Gen 2. Same thing. I have no idea what they were smoking, but they were. And this is the time where people gave up on USB naming convention and you start to talking in gigabits per second, because otherwise you will get confused. Think about it this way, like you went from USB 3 to USB 3.2 Gen 2, you will think, whoa, high speed. Nah, it's the same thing. Like this actually happened. I have no idea how, but it happened. Now, we were reaching into era of this, so USB was upgraded again. This time, it was upgraded to USB 3.1, 10 gigabits per second or 1 gigabytes per second, or what is the cheapest enclosure, NVMe enclosure you can buy, generally will support that speed, like this puppy. I will share the link down below, purchase link down below. Now, this time USB-A is being deprecated slowly. Basically, we are going from USB-A to USB-C. Now, you have to understand, going from USB 3 to USB 3.1 or 5 gigabits per second to 10 gigabits per second, wire count was not changed. You had the exact same wire. So the cord, basically, if you have a cord that is rated for 5 Gbps, USB-C to USB-C, it will work for 10 Gbps also. So I have to rename this cable into 5 Gbps to 10 Gbps. It will work without any issue. However, once we reach the upper limit of basically USB normal, basically same cord count, same physical wire, same data channels, it was renamed again. Yeah, I'm not joking, this happened. USB 3.1 Gen 2. That was the first rename. Then they renamed it again. USB 3.2 Gen 2, they renamed it. Now, this is available for USB-A port and USB-C port. Both are now in the market. And if you have a cord that says it's 10 Gbps and it has USB-A, it will still work. The conductor count has not changed. So it's basically you had the same conductor, you upgrade the interface. Basically how your network cable go from 100 megabits per second to 1 Gbps. same wire, but it can increase the frequency of communication. Same thing was done here. Now, this is the most common right now. You can buy, the cables are cheap, the interfaces are there, most computers have this, most laptops have this, even Apple laptops have this. It's very common. However, because of progression in NVMe, be mindful, this can support 1 gigabyte. It's like, bro, I'm limited by the interface, not limited by the flash chip or the controller. Both can easily outperform that. So a new interface was created, USB 3 to 3.2. This is 20 gigabytes. Now, this is the flagship of USB limit. This is 2 gigabytes per second. Meaning, by the way, you don't need this sort of stuff. Be mindful. We were editing videos on these. Going from this to this is fast enough. Going from this 500 to 1 gigabytes, more than good enough. You can do video editing on this without too much hassle. Even the latency would be good enough. So we upgraded again now, because again, this was reaching a point where the interface was the weak link, not the NVMe chip or NVMe protocol or the all that. So that was not the weak link, the USB was doing it. So USB was upgraded. Now this time they had to physically change, because they increase the frequency. You cannot increase frequency beyond a certain point. The conductor does not work the way that you expect. The interface, basically wherever you are plugging it in, it's not working as you expect. So they had to change it. So now they are only using USB-C to USB-C, meaning if you ever find a system that is claiming 20 Gbps and it has USB-C to USB-A or A to A, run. It's fake. It cannot be, simply because the conductor count on this is not enough to sustain 20 Gbps. That's why 20 Gbps is still rare. Even though it came few years ago, it's not common, simply because even in my motherboard, which is like a AMD 7000 series, it has only one port that supports 20 Gbps. It's very rare, simply because you need to use full conductor count of this. Like USB-C has a lot of conductor count. That was the reason they like pre-planned a USB-C for that sort of expansion. It does consume a lot of conductor. Basically, you go from two data pairs, positive minus, data positive minus, and receive positive minus, transmit positive minus. So you go from this to this. So that's why you need C to C. You cannot have C to A. So 20 Gbps is very expensive. Now, could you buy this? Absolutely not that expensive. You can buy it and enjoy your life with that. Now, only do that if you actually need it. I would recommend, in most of the time, save your money on the enclosure and spend it on the chip itself, the actual NAND flash. Instead of buying 1 terabyte, try to splurge for 2 terabyte one. Enjoy in that way. That would be far more useful for majority of people, rather than going into a smaller capacity but higher speed. But again, if you need it, like for some example, you need it and it's doable, first check your system. If you have Apple, it will not work. Most Apple laptops do not support USB 3.2, or it was renamed one time again, USB 3.2 Gen 2 X2. Yeah, so it may not support it. So even though your drive could be there, but Apple laptops do not support it, because it's not backwards compatible with Thunderbolt. I'll explain that further. So 20 Gbps is the maximum you can get for cheap. So this is the cheapest, 1000 rupees. You can get like 3000 to 4000 rupees. You can get 20 Gbps one. Would I recommend it? Not really. But again, if you need it, like if you are doing backups and you are moving large enough file and you have ports that can support it, if you need that time saving 2x benefit, go for it. But be mindful, at that point in time, you may want to not buy the cheapest flash available, because again, this also had the same issue. If it's very small in terms of capacity, it will also have the DRAM, so to say. As long as you're dumping memory into RAM, it's super fast. But the moment you go from dumping from memory to into actual flash, it will slow down. But again, 2 Gbps nowadays, anything that is made after 2022, it should not be an issue. Unless you are buying hyper cheap devices, it should not be an issue. Now, be mindful, the cords are expensive, meaning you cannot use normal cords. Thankfully, from basically 5 GPS cord, you can use it for 10 Gbps. Like this is a brand new, again, they are being deprecated because again, it's a power cord also, USB-C power delivery also. But 5 GPS, I have bought this, using it for 1 GPS without any issues, simply because the conductor count has not changed. But if I buy the 20 Gbps or 2 gigabytes per second throughput, this cord will no longer be sufficient. And it's a very big issue if you need long cable. If you need short cable, that's not an issue. But if long cable, it's a very big issue. So you have to be very mindful. Only invest into basically 20 Gbps if you need that throughput. In most time, it will be better off investing it into capacity. So that was few years ago. USB 3.2 was launched, and then they smoked again. They renamed again. USB 3.2 Gen 2 X2. Yeah. This happens again and again. I do not have any idea. And again, this time it's only C to C. So that's there. So now we come into the reality that Apple people were like Thunderbolt will become a thing, but Thunderbolt was proprietary from Intel, and it was not selling much. And again, it was not selling enough, so mass production was not there. Price was not coming down. Less people were buying, so it was stuck in a loop where it was slowly, barely hanging on. Like from a company's point of view, you're like, oh, a lot of products were there. Of course, they're like a rich people product. You never want to be a company that sells Lamborghini. You want to be a company that sells Honda. Look at the price profit of them, then you will understand. So the problem was that it was not selling enough. So Intel goes to USB association. It's like, bro, I'm feeling generous today. Here's whole USB association can now utilize Thunderbolt 3 protocol openly. Meaning, if you have USB 4 device that is properly built, it will work with Thunderbolt 3, and Thunderbolt 3 device will work with USB 4. So now that that Apple border, that Thunderbolt border is now broken through. And AMD can now actually give you USB 4, which is Thunderbolt 3, and same can be done for Qualcomm also. So they can now actually give you USB 4. Now, what's the speed? Yeah, they smoked again, and they have two variation in it. So variation number 1, USB 4 Gen 2 X2, that is 20 GPS. And I'm like, wait a minute, isn't that the same speed as normal USB? Yeah and no. The normal USB, if you have, let's say you bought an Enclosure that claims USB 4 20 GPS versus a 3.2 20 GPS, 3.2 20 GPS will not work with Apple. It will work with Microsoft. It will not work with Apple. If you have USB 4, it will work with Apple devices. So if you are an Apple user, then you may have to invest, even for 20 GPS, you may have to invest into USB 4. Only then you can get the full speed. And it also has Gen 3 X2, which is 40 gigabits per second, 4 gigabytes. At that point in time, you are reaching where cheap drives will fall apart. Even expensive drive, if you're like, let's say it's a 2 terabyte drive, once you start to fill up to like, let's say 30 to 80% of it, it will slow down. Like that's that fast. So that's Thunderbolt 3 made into USB 4. And yeah, that's the naming convention of it. It's messy as all hell. So let me clarify. Do not look into the names of USB. You will be confused because it has been renamed again and again. So always focus on what is the gigabits per second. So 5 gigabit is the basic variant. Do not go below this. 5 gigabits, and you cannot even go below this nowadays. But again, that's the bare minimum. Anything that is competent and want to use with the NVMe, you should go for 1 gigabyte. That's the sweet spot. Ports are there, cords are there, enclosures are there, mass production is there, everything is sweet, everything is nice, and it's more than good enough. Be mindful, we were running computer servers on these things. This is almost 10x faster, so more than good enough. That's not an issue. You may want to invest into high quality metal one, because again, they do heat up. So metal is a big requirement, especially if once you start to go higher speed. That's why many enclosures that are high speed, especially 20 GPS or 40 GPS, they generally have a cooling fan. They do heat up at that speed. So 20 GPS, I do not recommend it. But again, if you need that speed and you have ports for it, go YOLO on it. You can still buy it relatively cheaply. And if you are an Apple guy, you have to go into USB 4, expensive. But again, you are buying Apple, so you should be able to buy it, or Thunderbolt 3. But do not expect Thunderbolt 3 system to work on USB plugs. It has to be USB 4 only. Only then it can back support it. So this was basically the journey that we have been through, around with starting with this and ending with this. This is the final form. And the reason why I'm saying making into this, because right now there were only 2 or 3 popular models. One was Samsung model, another was Western Digital model, SanDisk one. SanDisk is bought by Western Digital. Yeah, it is malfunctioning like crazy. And people are building their careers on that. We're like, why? Many cameras require the ability to not require, as in like they have the ability to directly dump raw footage from your camera to SSD directly. So at that point, you do need SSD. You cannot do that on these things. Those were like, 600 megabytes or 700 megabytes file sizes. So you needed this, and many people did that and did work. It's just all of them are failing right now. So a lot of people have like very bad taste using that. So I would recommend go with Enclosure. It's actually cheaper, and because of the current reality of, there were only 2, Samsung one and this one is like, so I would say only benefit you will get if you buy those devices is that waterproofing. You have to buy Asus, tough system SSD. My brother had bought it, which has rough waterproofing, meaning if you caught in a rain or like it drops in somewhere, it should not instantly be bricked, hopefully. But don't test it. It's one of the, it's just like a peace of mind insurance. Do not test it. It's not meant to be tested. So be mindful. And if you want to go all out USB 4, at that point in time, be ready to pay a lot for the enclosure and be ready to have fan noise, because again, it does need that sort of oomph in order to cool it down. So this was my presentation on basically how we went from this puppy to this puppy. Hopefully you have liked it, learned from it. In that case, please click the like button, share it amongst your friends. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I urge you to press dislike, press it twice to show me extra disappointment. Please leave a comment because I do try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free, and as always, thanks for watching.